Hey everyone, Marcus here. I have created a solution for function calling. I need feedback from developers if what I have done is an actual good solution around function calling. So if you're a developer, please try to look at this video and give feedback. I will post it on Slack. So if you don't know what function calling is, the idea is basically that you use a structured way of describing a function and its variables and how the variables should be filled out, and you provide the LLM with this, and when someone asks around this, it's gonna fill out these variables and use the function if it makes sense to use the function. So in this case, I've created a calculator function that takes an expression and can execute this. So in this case, I have asked, what is 50 times 342 plus 81? This is something that LLMs in general are very bad at when it comes to math. So this is a typical example where function calling or a tool is very useful. This is being sent together with here. I'm saying I want to attach the calculator that we can use that, and I want to execute the function call. So I actually want to execute the answer to this. I will showcase how that works later. And you see it has figured out that this is the expression we want to put into the function, and when it executes, it's using PHP to figure out that this is the actual result. So that is the idea. So I will showcase how you can set this up if the structure I have set up is good for this, how it normalizes it, and how you put this into a provider. So the first thing I will talk about is how you actually use this in the end product. So how you can become more productive when you're working with LLMs, and how you can get structured content back from the LLM. So in this case, what we're gonna do, we're gonna take a very typical example that exists, that we want to figure out the weather somewhere, and we want to figure that out from free text because maybe you have a chat or something. So the first thing you should know is that there is a helper service. So I will come to later that there's an operation type that has normalized this into the chat, but there is a helper service, and that's probably the thing you should work with when you're actually working with this as an end product. So there is a function calling plugin manager that creates plugins that you can use that is actual functions, and that's also what you can list, and what then shows up in this example in the chat explorer as a function that we can test as well. So I'm just gonna create one. So I will show you, it's under plugin AI function call. You can see we have the calculator that I introduced. We're just gonna create something now then called weather. And I am gonna showcase that there are, under service function calling here, two different interfaces. So there is the function call interface, and this is if you just want to see the actual object, but you don't actually want the AI to do something reusable with it. So you don't want it to be able to execute it in a consistent manner. You just want to see it because maybe you use it as a DTO, maybe you use it for other reasons. And there are basically three functions that you have to fill out here, but all of them are actually taken care of in a base function. So when you do this under base, there is function calling base. So you can just extend from this, and this will actually take care of populate value, function name, and normalize. You don't have to think about that at all. So what this is gonna do is it's gonna normalize into the way we have normalizations of tools or functions inside the AI core module. So you don't have to think about that, because that, as you can see here, it adds a lot of code, but in this case you don't have to think about that. So I have prepared stuff here. I'm not gonna sit and write code, but I'm gonna showcase what you basically need to do in this case. So I'm just gonna start by copying some classes that we are going to use, and I'm gonna showcase here. Then we're gonna make an executable function. So if it's using the executable function call interface, what you can do then in the chat explorer is that you can execute the function call, so you can actually see the result as well. And this is so you can set up different functions that has a common way of executing them, basically. So this has now made the plugin, but since it's a plugin, we also, of course, need an attribute, and the attribute in this case is function call. You can find this under attribute. And in this case, then we're gonna set an ID. ID is module name colon whatever is the function name. We need to have a function name, a readable name, and a description. The description is very important because that is being fed to the LLM what the function is doing. And then we need an output that is gonna be, in this case, the temperature. Oh yeah, so it's actually just checking up the temperature. I'm just showcasing a very simple way of doing this in this case. And then we're gonna have input attributes as well, or properties here. That's gonna be city, it's gonna be country, and it's gonna be unit. So that is basically what we're gonna try to extract from the LLM. Let's just wrap these in some descriptions as well. So we wrap those in descriptions, and here comes basically the only thing you need to do. No, there's two things, but the first thing you need to do is use something called a function property, which is another attribute. So we're just gonna put that there for each of those. And to understand these, you can go into the function property to get a pretty clear understanding of what you can fill out and what you can't fill out. I'm gonna showcase it here. So if you open the function property, you see there's some required things: some property name, type, and description, and an example value is good to feed in as well, so it knows how to fill it out. Then there are a lot of things, depending if it's an integer, if it's enum, and so on, that you can fill in, like options, max length, and so on. But in this case, what we have filled in is city, the city to get the weather for, country, the country to get the weather for, unit to get the weather for. And then there are two methods that we have to fill out because we're using executable function call. And one is execute, and this will just execute based on the values. And another is get readable output, that should always give back a string. So it expects you to give back a string. So I will just copy the execution code, which is extremely ugly, but this is just to showcase. So it's using the geocode, OpenMeteo API in this case, to basically figure out what is the temperature. It stores it in this temperature. That's just so we can move it along then to the get readable output. And you can see here then that it's using this city, this country. So this has been populated by the time that execute happens. So now when I have saved this, I just flush the cache. So if we reload now, after the flush of the cache, it should show up. And you see we still have the calculator here. I'm actually going to choose both just to showcase that I can also, of course, think about which one it should use, or maybe use both depending on the prompt. Now we're just going to ask what is the weather in Berlin, Germany, and hopefully it's gonna extract then Berlin and Germany and put those into the attributes. It has Celsius as default, and then it's gonna execute this. Now I can just showcase also if we want it in Fahrenheit, we just well, let's do this maybe in F. It should understand that hopefully from context that we mean Fahrenheit, and fill that out. And yeah, that is it. That's how you can take some unstructured and create it into a structured class using these new tools. Then how you do it in your code. So you're creating a third-party provider or your private things. This is how you would do it. So you can always get code examples in the Chat Explorer, and this will showcase, in this case, from here, how you input it. So it says that the tools, AI Weather and AI Calculator, so that's the plugins we want to use. We load them via the plugin provider, put it in an array that we just normalize. We put these functions into an actual function as well, because we're going to use them to execute them in this case, because we clicked execute, right? And then you just use this function, set chat tools, where you take a new tools input of all the functions. So there are other tools like a browser and other stuff that certain provider has that we haven't normalized yet, because they are very provider specific, but function calling is it's starting to be available at many providers. So for now it's just function callings are the only tools at the moment. And then if we get tools back from the response, so there is a method get tools on the normalized response, we can go through these, we can load the actual function again and populate the values that's inside tool, and we can also then execute it if it's executable function call interface, and then get the readable output, which in this case is this, because that we could feed into another LLM to create a human human readable explanation if you have a chatbot, for instance. So that's simple as that. So the next step I'm gonna talk about is normalization, and that is basically what powers everything and what you have to think about when you create an AI provider then. So under operation type, that's where we have all our normalization. There is under tools, under chat tools, and this is basically everything that is available for normalization purposes of function calling. So it basically starts with a tools input, and the tools input is the base for showcasing all the tools. Currently, just as I said before, accepts functions. So this just takes an array of functions that you can push into it, and this is what is happening when you normalize one of the objects that you have created. It just creates a tools function input. So that is what it's generating when you're doing it. So it's just normalizing into a way that each of the providers should be able to understand, and then you can use it basically. So the tools input, the most important function that this has is render tools array, and this will render the tools according to the CXP, the new Anthropic context protocol that they have generated. The part of how you render tools, you can get rendered as an array here. Of course, if you're, for instance, OpenAI, you might have to shift this a little bit. If you're using Llama, you might have to shift this a little bit, and so on. So that is the most important thing. Of course, if you're just using this as a third party module that wants to use it, then what I showcased before is probably the easier way of doing it. But you can, of course, also start with, you have to start lowest down the chain, and that is tools property input. Then put the property inputs into the function inputs. So that is what these two attributes I showed before did. They create property inputs and they create function inputs, and then put it into the tools input. And then the chat interface will now then have something that is called set chat tools. And that's the only thing you need to do. So you put in your tools input into the chat tools, set chat tools, and then after you have run it, you can use get chat tools to get the actual output of this. And the output of this is also normalized then. So you're gonna get a tools output. And what you can do there actually is that you can validate. So you can validate that the output that you got actually has functions, and that those function has the properties that you have declared, and that those properties actually are given back correctly, meaning that it can check that the min length is actually under the min length, or that if you're asking for a string, that it is actually a string, for instance. So yeah, this is what you get back, and this is then what you can start playing with. The thing I still have to add here is that you also can get this as an actual function. So you get out the function name with the arguments in a simple manner and not normalized manner, but otherwise this is more or less done. So the last part I will show you is how to set it up or use it in a provider then. So in this case, I'm going to showcase OpenAI provider. I so far have ported OpenAI and Ollama to this. I will port Mistral and Anthropic before the merge request will go into the AI core. But the reason I'm doing this video so early is because I want feedback if the whole solution is actually a good solution. So yeah, say that you have a provider. The get chat tools and set chat tools is part of the abstract base class. So you can just do this get chat tools will get you the normalized input that I talked about before. And if you're lucky, you can just use render tools array and give that as a parameter. So that's actually what happens here. We just put it on tools. But it might be that you need to then denormalize it for your specific provider. When you have done that, this will, this gets sent as a parameter. And what happens here then is, in this case, it checks the output from OpenAI. And this is where the tools calls are located. And I just iterate through them if they do exist. Then in this case, I get back the arguments, and they are in this case then given back as a JSON. So we just decode those arguments, and then you can create a tools function output, and that actually takes the input function. So that's how it can validate. So there is a helper class in the chat tools called getFunctionByName. So as long as it's mapping to the name that you have, you can just use this, and you can just give the arguments, and that's enough. When you have done that, what you can do is, when you create the new message that goes back out, there is now a method on this called setTools, and you just have to set this. So that goes out with the chat message, so it's part of the message. So the end user can basically use this in their third-party module. So that is how you will have to add it into the AI provider. So it is a merge request, but it is in draft, because as I showed you, I still have to do some helper functions on the normalization layer, and I have to write documentation for it all. So if you have worked with function calling, or in general, if you watch this video and think this is a very stupid idea, this is a good idea, any feedback would be great. There is an issue for this. It's in the links here. If you watch it on YouTube, it's in the show notes. Or you can just go to #AI on Drupal Slack and discuss it. I will also post the video there. So yeah, please come with feedback on this.